Hello again. Um, if you followed me through the first two parts of my story, I would have left it where I mentioned the fact that I'm still suffering from anxiety now, or have been. But I want to show you in this part what I did wrong the first time round and how I'm now getting out of this anxiety state and freeing myself from panic attacks. Because whilst I did recover the first time, I desensitized and I basically got back to normal. And for years after that, I was not in a state of anxiety. Whilst I did that, I didn't do it the right way. And this is going to sound strange to say, doing it the right way. Either you get out of it or you don't. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And above all, I want to show you in this recording, give you a message of hope and try and prove to you that you can get out of an anxiety state and stay out of it. Now, in 1972, I freed myself of anxiety, and I went through a lot of events after that for many years. I got married, had a daughter, had a good job, I did lots of different things, and anxiety played a fairly small part in my life because I did all sorts of things I never dreamed I'd do, like getting married for a start. But I went through some difficult times too, and I ended up in 2003, which that is when everything started up again, and over the years I've worked out exactly what went wrong and how I managed to find myself back in the state of getting anxiety and panic attacks again now. And this is where I have to explain this idea of getting better the right way, because that was clearly what I hadn't done the first time. And through all the years following it, I didn't realize that I was vulnerable. I lived in a kind of fool's paradise, really, because I thought I was cured and I was going to stay cured. But I'd never truly faced my anxiety and my fear at their very worst, and it was that aspect which caught up with me in 2003. Now, in the years leading up to that, they were very difficult, the early part of the millennium, after the year 2000, and for several years after that, up till January 2003, when panic came back, I went through some very hard times. I was out of work most of the time. I'd had some good work up to about 2001. I used to do IT contracting, which was good work. It was hard because it involved a lot of travelling. But things changed in the market for that type of work, and I've ended up not being able to find work. So by the time we got to 2003, things were pretty bleak in terms of finances. I hadn't managed to find any other kind of work. I tried all sorts of different things, but nothing to match what I was capable of doing. So in particular, the months that led up to 2003 were very, very hard, because we went through a particularly bad patch money-wise, and it was an immense strain. And as it happened all those years before, I managed to get myself very sensitized, and I recognized that in myself because I remember what it was like. And I knew by my reactions to situations that everything was getting exaggerated again. And yes, I had anxiety feelings, but I was still confident that the year that I recovered would, I wouldn't be able to get back into that state again, because I had a number of misguided ideas about how I recovered the first time. So anyway, like I said, the months leading up to January 2003 were pretty harsh. Then in early January 2003, I was out and about one day. It was a very cold January day, and I was very much tensed up against the cold. And I wasn't doing anything special. I was just doing a bit of shopping, just going around shops in my town. And I was walking down a shopping street, and I suddenly became aware of a very strange and disturbing feeling inside of me. It was in my stomach, and it was the most peculiar sensation I'd ever had, and it certainly wasn't anything I had experienced before. And being as how I was in a tired and sensitized state, it made a deep impression on me, because it frightened me immediately, because I didn't know what was happening. I thought something bad was about to happen. And it was a strange kind of twisting, cramped, difficult to describe sensation. And it was in my stomach area. Now, I've already mentioned the fact that I've always been phobic about vomiting all my life. Now, in the intervening years, because I wasn't sensitized, that fear kind of stayed in the background. In fact, during that time I had been sick a couple of times, so it wasn't something that was foremost in my mind. But this strange, weird feeling inside of me, I instantly leapt to the wrong conclusion and thought that it meant I was going to vomit. I was wrong as it happened, but that's how it seemed at the time. So anyway, that thought made a very deep impression on me, and it caused a panic attack in me. I freaked out at the prospect of walking down this busy street with all these people around and then suddenly throwing up all over the place. And I thought, oh God, no, please, no. I still had a few things to do, and I remember clearly I was shaking and trembling and suffering all the worst effects of a panic attack that I'd known from years before. And I was shocked and worried about what would happen. I mean, I finished what I was doing and I went home. I wanted to get home quickly. I didn't want to be out. I mean, I wasn't sick. The feeling itself just kind of wore off. And then it was the start of that same path I'd taken all those years before, because having had one frightening experience and suffered panic as a result, or at least that's how I saw it, I was living in fear of it coming back again. Now, what happened in the days and weeks that followed was just really stupid, because in the frame of mind that I was in, that is, sensitized, I came to all sorts of stupid conclusions about what had happened to me now and what had happened in the past. Now, through all the years between the first time I was ill in 2003, I had a pretty clear idea, or at least I thought I did, of what was involved in panic attacks and what was involved in anxiety. And I thought I understood it, and therefore, being able to understand it, I realized, or I thought, that I was not going to suffer that way anymore. But in the state of mind that I was in, I began to think and brood on things again. And I looked back at my earlier experiences. Now, for years I thought that the times in my teens when I had panics, I thought the only reason I'd gotten so frightened was because I'd felt so sick. And that idea had stuck in my mind all those years. I didn't associate, and I didn't think of any other reason for me, to be in the panic state that I was on those two occasions. Now, this is where my thinking went awry, and I basically thought in such a way that I trapped myself into a new anxiety cycle, simply because I misunderstood what had happened. Now, I thought about what happened to me, the strange twisty feeling in my stomach, and then I thought back to what happened to me the first time around. I concluded that what had happened the first time around was actually a panic attack, or panic attacks, and that the feeling sick was part of the panic attack. It wasn't the other way around, as I had thought all those years. And I compared it to what had just happened to me, and I thought it was kind of similar, which meant that my previous idea of what panic attacks were and what they felt like and what they did to me now changed. Suddenly, I saw panic in a completely different way, and I thought, supposing every time this thing happens, this strange feeling inside, and then the panic attack effect, supposing now it carries with it the threat of being sick. Now, in ordinary times, I would never have dwelt on that thought. It was simply because my mind, excuse me, my mind was tired, and I was sensitized, and therefore the reactions I was getting were exaggerated. So now I thought, oh my God, what if this feeling comes back and it makes me sick? So now panic was associated with being sick. And I was completely wrong anyway, but then the idea stuck. Those of you who've been in this state for a while know how your mind gets itself into a groove and you can't reason with anything. Fear takes over control of your mind, and however many reassurances you get, however many things you hear and read, your mind gets stuck on an idea and you can't shift it. Your mind goes round and round and round. And the more it does that, the more frightening something seems or becomes to you. So anyway, now I was facing a huge problem. I thought, well, supposing this thing comes back and it keeps on coming back. Now, obviously, fearing something so much, inevitably it came back, and the next time it came, the reaction was exactly the same. I panicked big time, worse than the first time, and that reinforced the idea that what I had concluded about panic was true, even though it was nothing of the kind. So now I found myself having a really big problem. This thing now was going to haunt me, and I was trying to figure a way out of the situation. How was I going to cope with whatever I needed to do? I mean, things were very different now. There were things I had to do. I couldn't just stop and rest for the duration and recover like I'd done when I was in my teens. I had responsibilities, I had things to do, I couldn't just say, all right, I'm not going to do anything for a few months until I feel better. It just wouldn't work. So all that just made things worse, and I realised the implications of this. And it just kind of continued and escalated from there. I lived in fear of this thing happening. And naturally, it kept on happening, and it happened more often, more intensely. It used to wake me up at night. I used to lie in bed for hours in this state. My stomach used to be in a terrible state. And it was all a case of mistaken identity. But at the time, I just didn't see that. It was a new and frightening cycle I put myself into. Now, before I go on any further, I must explain what was really going on. As I was out that morning in the freezing cold, and my whole body was tensed up against the cold. It was, really, really cold, and I was out in it for about 2 hours prior to this thing happening. And what had been happening was that I was breathing very badly. In fact, I was barely breathing. Just very slightly breathing. Now, I've talked briefly about hyperventilation, but one of the things that can happen if you breathe in a very shallow way for long enough, it can reach a point where it sets off alarm bells in your body, and your body responds by pumping a huge dose of adrenaline into your bloodstream. And that is basically what happened to me. My body thought I was suffocating because I was breathing so badly. So whoosh, all this adrenaline went into my bloodstream, and that's why the panic ensued. The hyperventilation that actually produced a panic attack. Now, at that time, I didn't make the connection, I didn't understand, and that is precisely what had happened in my teens. The same process was at work. Somehow or other, I got myself in a state of breathing badly, and it had triggered a panic attack. Now, I should stop at this point and mention something curious that happened in the intervening years. It was sometime in the 1990s. I was working at a good job. I was a programmer analyst, and I was pretty content with what I was doing. And I vividly remember one afternoon, for no obvious reason, the same thing as had happened to me in my teens began to happen again. And I was at work. It was late afternoon. Now, this shows the difference between when you're sensitized and when you're not. The same feeling started to happen. I went off, I tried to distract myself, and I was shaking again and trembling. I remember going into what was then a smoking room. I had a cigarette, and then I went to the toilet because I was still feeling sick. I locked myself in the toilet, and I was really pretty agitated and panicky by that point because I really thought I was going to be sick. And it was exactly the same as it had been in my teens. And I remember standing there in the toilet thinking, oh God, what's going to happen? But I remember at the very point at which I thought I was going to vomit, I actually remember taking a deep breath and letting it out. And almost miraculously, the feeling dissipated. I still felt shaky and trembly and weird, the after effects of a panic attack. And once again, because I still believed that feeling sick made me panic, not the other way around, I remember going home on the train that day and being a bit baffled by it because I couldn't understand why it had happened. But that is where it stopped. I remember going home and having my tea as usual and not dwelling on it. I thought, well, it was just one of those strange things. I didn't become obsessed with it. I was basically happy where I was and not sensitized. So that is the difference. Same symptoms, exactly the same symptoms, but a different context because my frame of mind was different and my sensitization, I wasn't sensitized. So that's basically how I came to be back in anxiety in 2003. And for a long time, I think it wasn't continuous after that, up to date. There's been fluctuations in it. For years after that, I still was in this state where I feared these horrible feelings. That feeling, in fact, like I said, it was me over-breathing, and that strange feeling inside was me, my body, trying to get me to breathe properly. It was my diaphragm, basically. I mean, the thing is, the diaphragm is associated with vomiting anyway. It's what happens when you do. But that is how I jumped to that conclusion, because I knew that, and that's why I feared that's what was going to happen. But it's also obviously associated with breathing. It was my body trying to make me breathe. And apart from the great dose of adrenaline I just suffered, it was my body trying to get me to breathe properly again. So years went on after that, and I went through a process. Things didn't get better work-wise. I still couldn't find any proper work. I did start up a business myself and did some IT work, and that things improved a bit for a while at least. But then I went through a process of obsessing over different symptoms. I was still basically in that sensitized state. I didn't really get over it properly. It kind of ebbed and flowed, and like I say, it wasn't so bad all the time. When I found work I could do and started earning some money again, that improved things. I wasn't so obsessed with the way I felt. But I went through a phase then of picking on particular symptoms. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of this process. Whatever state of anxiety you're in, wherever it came about, there's always a symptom or symptoms that preoccupy you the most. There's always something you dread the most or fear that will happen the most, and it's always that one which causes the worst reaction in you. Now, as time went on, I began to get, there was continuous tension for one reason or another, and I began to get these headaches, and I used to wake up in the morning with headaches. And over a period of time, the headaches started to get more widespread, more intense, and more frequent, and I began to obsess over those. This all sounds very pathetic, really. I mean, why was I so preoccupied with all this stuff all the time? It's because my life was just limping along, really. I didn't have any clear direction to my life. Yes, I did have work to do, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't like I'd been in the past, where I had some sort of stability in what I was doing. And there were lots of other circumstances which, like family bereavements and things happen which put extra strain on me, not just me, on the whole family. So that became an issue. Headaches became an issue, and they became the new thing. But it wasn't just the headaches. Again, it was a case of me reacting the wrong way to the headaches. Now, headaches are headaches. Everybody gets them, and the time was when I didn't really think much about them. I accepted them when I had them, and I used to take a painkiller, and that would be that. But this became a total obsession with me, and I dreaded them because my reaction to them, when I used to wake up with them in the mornings, was always to start hyperventilating. And a cycle followed from that, where these things became so dreaded by me. I used to spend whole days in a state of utter panic because the headache started, and then the pain got worse, and my breathing got faster and faster, and I used to end up in a total state of panic. And this used to go on the whole day. It used to go into the night as well. I used to go to bed, and it's still going on, and I used to lie there with my head and neck so painful I couldn't sleep. And usually by the time I dragged myself out of bed in the morning, it used to wear off. But this pattern repeated itself over and over and over again. And I didn't know the way out of it. I used to try all sorts of things. Painkillers didn't really help. Occasionally I used to try them, but it didn't really break the cycle. And that took over as being the obsession of my life. And I used to live in dread and fear of that happening. And this went on for years and years. And gradually I found ways. I used to, like I say, take painkillers, which used to help sometimes. But what really changed it was I used to complain bitterly to the doctor about it, and they weren't much help. And eventually I wouldn't take aspirin, because aspirin always used to upset my stomach anyway, and I didn't need that. But I found that a combination of paracetamol and a mild tranquilizer from the doctor, which, you know, showed them what a state I was in over it all, that gradually began to break the cycle. But then something else happened last year, which did really alter things, and I will talk about that in the next recording, because it really shows that will show what the actual secret is to recovering from this state, what you need to do, because that taught me a lot. So when I come back next time, I'll explain exactly what happened and tell you where I'm at now, which I hope will actually make you feel there is hope for you, and you will actually do as I've been doing and get yourself out of this horrible state. So until the next time, bye for now.